instead of saying it's an illness versus health, is to say that's just something that needs to be developed. And if you look at it that way, it's not so stigmatizing. If we shift our mind and our construct, we would experience it very differently.
When you shift the way you think and feel, you also shift how you experience your life. That's what this podcast is all about, helping you make good shifts so you can make better decisions according to what you want. When I started working with Steve, he insisted we not use the outdated term mental health. Let's find out why.
Well, I think the big reason is if you say mental health, then you also think maybe what's the opposite of that, which would be mental disease or mental illness. But I don't think that's been thought through very carefully. Who's the norm, or what's the norm that you're comparing it against? What's the mental healthy person or mental healthy group? Because I think that's hard to define. So I think although we can all agree that everyone struggles and some people struggle most or if not all of the time, another way to look at it is that people might lack certain cognitive skills or self-regulation skills, as it's called, or just the ability to understand their thoughts and emotions and then be able to sort of navigate that. If that's something that somebody struggles with, another way to look at it, instead of saying it's an illness versus health, is to say, oh, well, that's just something that needs to be developed. And if you look at it that way, it's not so stigmatizing. It's not so devastating a thing to hear, like you have blah, blah, blah disorder.
Yeah.
And so I think one of the big problems we know is that people don't want to go get help because they don't want to be stigmatized, labeled. They don't want that devastating statement to come out of a professional's mouth that's like, you have such and such disorder. And then some of these things, they say there's no cure. That's a lifelong situation. It can affect your life, your work. So that's why I feel that mental health as a term implies the opposite, and I tend not to want to use it.
Yeah, I guess I'm just so used to the term, but when you put it that way, it does sound a bit stigmatizing. As a psychologist, how do you think that kind of terminology can affect us? And why do you think it's important to move away from the concept of receiving a diagnosis?
Well, I've been working 25 years as a professional, either a psychologist or a marriage family therapist. I've worked with a lot of different people. I've worked with little children. I've worked with couples. I've worked with families. I've worked with people that are incarcerated, people who are just living their lives as mothers, fathers, brothers, sisters, just struggling, whatever. But one thing that can happen that I've seen many, many, many times is that somebody will go see a professional. They will get a diagnosis, and that will devastate them in the sense that they now feel, and they already did feel before they got that diagnosis, that there was something fundamentally wrong and inferior about them. Now you go to a professional and they've confirmed that fear. They've said, well, yes, you have blah, 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 whatever it is. And now they're mortified. They're really, really, really feeling lost, upset, devastated. But now, of course, the solution is to go into treatment, psychological treatment, or perhaps take some prescribed pharmaceuticals that, promise to cure or manage or help you with that. I don't think there is any truly scientific support for making such a statement to a person. And I think the result of that is they feel awful. So now you're treating something that you've kind of created as a professional. They already felt pretty bad. They thought they were less than. Now you've confirmed it. Now they feel even worse. And now you're treating that. And I think this is a huge problem in our profession. This needs to change. I think we should be humble and say, you know what? Traditionally, we would say it's this. But you know what? The science is unsettled in this area. Let's focus on what's going on with you. So I'm trying to break free of this I don't know, prison of assumptions that are not well founded and try to help people in a way that doesn't make them feel bad from the very first conversation, which is you've got this disease or this thing wrong with you.
Okay, so do you think we are relying too much then on the diagnosis and maybe having that makes us feel like we have some kind of control over the situation? How would you say we can gain that control back?
Yeah, well, fundamentally, there's a way that the brain works, and that manifests in the way we experience our mind. So you can control certain things. There is certainly a choice of where you point your attention. So if you want and have an intention to be in more control of yourself, that means your experience of your life, which really refers to your emotional state that you're in. You just need to acquire a certain level of awareness and then to see the associative issues like what's your thought process? Is that thought 100% true? Where did you hear about it? How's it making you feel? Where do you feel it in your body? The more you understand and see those relationships, the easier it is for you to have that sense of where you want to point your attention and how you want to experience your day or the moment. Hopefully, the neurocog system is a way to empower people and give them the skills and capacity to do more of that. That's my hope.
Okay, we're talking about gaining control back and working on yourself to keep growing, right? That reminds me of another concept I've heard you say lots of times, and that's about having a growth mindset. Can you tell us a bit more about that and then compare it against what a fixed mindset might be like?
Well, the idea of development itself is that you're changing and growing. So if it's fixed, then that's saying that you'll never change, right? It's fixed. So by definition, arrests development. It means there's no way you can be better or grow or evolve or anything. You're just who you are. You were born that way. And while there are some elements to that being true, meaning some people are very up and bubbly, some people are more, low key, there are certain aspects of us that surely are unique to us. But it's such a vast combination of characteristics. It's impossible to say there's like types or profiles. And for years and years, they thought the Earth was the center of the universe, and then they discovered that didn't work out with understanding what we saw in the sky. And then finally they realized that wasn't true, but it took a while to move people from that idea. So yeah, there's a whole history to this fixed mindset that I think carries forward today that really interferes with people's ability to be able to see the world the way it really is, and then to be able to evolve and change and have, more hope and to see a much brighter future. Don't fix your mind into one small, idea of who you are. Nobody can define who a person is, especially, another person who's not lived their life.
I reckon that's one of my biggest personal challenges, like really trying to understand my emotions and where they're coming from, especially when I'm feeling really anxious. I know that even though I try really hard to keep regulating my thoughts, sometimes the anxiety does take over. Why do you think that anxiety can affect us this much, and why are we always comparing and overthinking all the time?
Anxiety is just one of several emotional states, and nobody really understands or agrees, I should say, on how many emotional states there are or could be. And when we feel it, when we experience it in ourselves, we recognize it as, hopefully, if we're aware, a physiological shift in our body. So it's not just in our brain or in our mind, it's not just the neuro or the cog, it's the whole body. And your whole body kind of shifts into a state, which everyone's been talking about for many, many years, the fight or flight thing. But it is a state of mind and a state of body that is anticipating something dangerous or threatening, right? And in our society, which is complicated, that can be something quite subtle. It can be a threat to your social position, which would then translate to your survival. So when we're in one of these states, it's important to recognize that it's being fed or driven by some assumptions, expectations, perceptions. And since, as I explain in the book, all of this is a construct, it's a picture that we paint of the reality that we live in. A lot of times there's a flawed picture. It's wrong. I mean, it's there. It's a thought, but it's not real. But you believe it. Why? Because it's kind of embedded in our brains, in the way that we are evolved to be a little fearful, a little careful, and protecting ourselves against some danger, right? If we shift our mind and our perceptions and our expectations and our construct, essentially, of the situation, we would experience it very differently. So that gives us an ability to cope with what people go, anxiety. It's just you're in an anxious state because you perceived a situation a certain way. Take a look at the way you're perceiving things. Is it accurate? If it's not, well, you don't have to experience your life that way or the moment that way. It's your life. How do you want to live it? Who do you want to be around? What thoughts and ideas do you want in your life? Whose ideas do you want playing in your head?
Right. So again, you're taking away the concept of the diagnosis. You don't have anxiety, you're in an anxious state. And so that way you get to work on it, right? You mentioned before the neurocog system, which you've created. What would you say inspired you to develop it?
So the neurocog system was inspired by my own experience and struggles, and then my experience as a practitioner trying to help others and having all these different types of psychotherapies and tools to use, and then realizing, wow, that's so complicated. Can we just make it simple? Can we just break it down into simple ideas and words that anyone could understand? So that's what I created, and I think it works really well. I use it with my clients, and they seem to take to it pretty quickly.
And how would you say that it's different from the other approaches? What can the neurocog system bring to the table that others can't?
Every technique and every modality, they call it, or mode or whatever, has an effective element or many effective elements or theory behind it. I think we need to collaborate and combine and just include all of these different things that are effective so that it can make sense no matter which you're in, because they all use different languages. So I think I'm trying to come up with a way that we can have a common language across all these different approaches to the same issue, and that is to help people live a better life, enjoy themselves better, be able to get out of bad moods and emotional states, and relate to each other better, solve problems better. I mean, there's so many approaches. Let's use them in one fundamental way that is able to combine them all as what works best for each person. And each person's different. So that's the idea.
That was Dr. Steve Wolfson on The Good Shift. Thanks for listening to today's episode. We hope you found it insightful. Don't forget, you can listen to more episodes on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. For extra tips and updates, follow us on Instagram and TikTok to learn more about the Neuri app. Download the app to access exercises that enhance your emotional awareness and help you make better decisions aligned with your life goals. See you next time.